Hello, and thank you for purchasing Corel Draw. My name is Susan Wimmer, and I'm here to give you this first look at our dynamic graphics package. This video will show you the major features of Corel Draw in action, and hopefully bring you up to speed that much quicker. It also serves as the ideal companion to our 8-lesson Learning Corel Draw tutorial that also came in your package. Before we get started, a reminder to register your package of Corel Draw. That way we can send you new product information or special offers. We can upgrade you to future versions of Corel Draw. You can enter the Corel Draw Design Contest and receive our user newsletter. Corel Draw has been praised for its intuitive approach to creating graphics. Tools are clustered logically, allowing you to create anything from headlines to complex illustrations. But that's enough of an introduction. Let's get down to business and actually see these features in action. When you first open Corel Draw, this is the screen you'll be seeing, or something very much like it. At the top is our program name, Corel Draw, and we haven't named our file yet, so this file is untitled. The second right here is the menu bar, and as you can see, I'm able to access many different menu options just by clicking and holding on the different headlines. We'll go through these one at a time later on. This third region right here is the status bar. This will give me a lot of information regarding the objects, the size, the placement, color, outline, these types of things, and I'll show you that as we go along. Right here are the rulers, and as you can see, when I'm moving around the screen, I'm able to pinpoint exactly where my object's going to be because I've got this little dashed line at the top that's showing me the placement of my object on the page. This is our drawing page right here. I'm set up for the tabloid size right now, and what will print is whatever I draw on that page itself. And over here is the Corel Draw toolbox. We talked about the intuitive display of tools within Corel Draw, and you can see the first tool is the Pick tool. Here is the Node Edit or Shape tool. This is our Zoom or magnifying glass. Here's our freehand drawing tool. This is a rectangle or square tool, the ellipse or circle. We have a text tool, an outline, and then a fill tool as well. And we'll go through each of these objects. So you can see how logical the tools are arranged. The first two are for editing, then our zoom tool, and then we have the 4 drawing tools, one after the other on the toolbox, finished up with the attribute tools, the outline, and then the fill tool. I also want to show you at this point how you can preview what you're going to be printing in Corel Draw. This is the drawing page. We also have 2 types of preview for you. I'm going to access them through the hotkeys. If I hit F9 on the top of my keyboard, what I'm getting is a full screen preview. This will show me only what's going to print on the page. I have another option. If I hit Shift F9, I can display a half-page preview. Over here on the right is what's going to print. Over here on the left is what I'm going to be working with. There are times when you want to work with a split screen preview, and there are times when you want to work with a full screen preview as well. But for right now, we're just going to stay with the drawing screen. Now that we've had an introduction to Corel Draw's menus, let's go through and actually put some objects down on the page. I'm going to start right here with our rectangle tool, and it's a very easy procedure to get a rectangle down on the page. I'm going to drag from one corner to the other. I can get a rectangle or a square of any size or shape I want. Notice that the status bar is giving me my width, height, my start point, end point, and where the center of the object is. And there are also some important concepts I'm going to introduce to you. I've not let up on my mouse button. If I hit the Control key and hold down the Control key, it's going to constrain this object to a perfect square. And this is an important concept because in Corel Draw, the Control key generally means that it's going to constrain an object to a specific size or shape. So in this case, I'm constraining my object to a perfect square, or if I release the Control key, I can draw a rectangle of any shape I want. Once I have the size and the shape that I'm after, I can just release the mouse button and my object is up on the page. Let's go to the ellipse tool now, and it works in much the same way. I can have an ellipse of any size or shape just by moving the mouse around on the page as I'm holding down the mouse key. The status bar is giving me information regarding the size of that option. And if I hold down the Control key again, it will constrain the object, this time to a perfect circle. The third drawing tool is our freehand drawing tool, and it's very easy to use. I'm just going to drag the mouse across the screen, and as you can see, I'm drawing a rough line here. If I want to clean up the line, I can hold down the Shift key and just retrace. Once I release the Shift key, I can go back to drawing and perhaps correct the line. And when I release the mouse button, the line will appear on the page. If I want to draw a straight line, I click on one end of the line, and then I can click on the other end of the line to draw a straight line. And in this case, if I hold down the Control key, it's going to constrain me to a set number of increments. I've set the program for 15-degree increments. So right here I can get a perfectly straight line just by holding down the Control key as I draw. And then once I click on the other end of the line, I'll anchor it, and there I have my straight line. The next drawing tool is the text tool, and we'll get into that in great depth as we go through the tutorial. But first I'm just going to put some text down on the page. I've clicked to access the text tool, and then I click on the page approximately where I'd like that text to appear. CorelDRAW has two types of text, and I'll go through each. The first is headline text, and their dialog boxes look very similar. Up here at the top you see the word text. This shows this is our headline text option box. And I'm going to put simply the name of the program down on the page, Corel. You notice the justification. You can set it to left. You can click on center, click on right, or click on no justification. We'll just leave it with left justification. And over here on the bottom left is where I would access the different typefaces that come with CorelDRAW. If I click through the different typefaces, I can select the one I'm interested in. And if you'll notice over here on the right, I am getting a visual reference of the first two letters of what I've typed up at the top. The capital C and the O are being shown for me down here at the bottom. So as you can see, if I go through the different typefaces, I'm getting a visual reference of how the first two letters of my text string will appear in the typeface I've selected. Now for a lot of the typefaces, we give you a number of different options. For example, in Bahamas, we can have normal or bold text, and I will get a visual reference of the bold if that's what I select. For some, I can, for example, in the Avalon, I could select italic or bold italic, and I will still get the visual reference. If the option is available to me, the word will appear highlighted. For example, in Arabia, that only comes in the normal typeface because these other options are not highlighted for me. If I want to scroll through all the different typefaces that CorelDRAW offers, I can use this elevator bar right here to the right of the text box by either holding down or clicking through. I'm going to just click one by one down through the list of typefaces, or I can drag the actual elevator bar and scan for the typeface I'm looking for. You see, I'm just holding down the mouse key and dragging the elevator bar down to, at this point, down to perhaps say Vogue, for example. And I can select any typeface I like. Well, let's just stick with Vogue, and we'll make this bold type. Over here is where I would set the size, the initial size of the type in my headline text, and I'm going to select it by cursor selecting. What I've done is hold down the mouse, drag it across to highlight the text itself, and then I'm going to change it to 60-point text. If I want, I can also use the up or down arrows right here to select the point size. I can also click right here in the box for how we're going to identify the text. We can either have the size identified in inches, millimeters, picas, and points, or just points. And I'll just leave it at points for this one. And I'll take it back down to 60 point size text. We also have some spacing options here. If I click on the spacing box, I can set the inter-character, inter-word, and interline text spacing in this box if I choose to. I can also do that on the screen, and I'll show you when we get to it. But for example, I could just use my arrows up and down to go from inter-character. I'll just leave it at inter-character spacing 0. Now that we've gone through the text dialog box, we have some text up in the screen. We've set our point size, we've selected the typeface. Let's click OK and get that text down on the page. So now you can see we do have that text down on our page. That's the first type of text that we have, headline text. There is a second type of text that comes with CorelDRAW, paragraph text. Now remember with the headline text, when we wanted to position it on the page, we just took our cursor and clicked on the page where we wanted it to appear. To access paragraph text, this is important, you'll want to drag your mouse and marquee select the area that you want your paragraph text to occupy. You see here I've got a dotted line around the area that I want a block of text to occupy. Once I have the approximate size and shape of that paragraph text block, I'm going to release the mouse button. Now that we've selected the area that our paragraph text is going to occupy, we enter into the paragraph text dialog box, and I want you to notice one important difference. Up here it is called paragraph text. When you see this title up here at the top of the screen, you're dealing with the paragraph text dialog box. It looks very much the same as the headline text dialog box that we were just working with, and that makes things very convenient. Up here we can enter in our text, and I'm just going to put a little bit of text here on the page. Hitting enter to get to the next line. Now I have some text down that we can play with. The justification is the same as with headline text. I can set left just by clicking on the different options, center, right, full, which means left and right justified, or none. And I'll set our text on left justified. I can select the typeface in a number of ways. I can click on the typeface that I'm looking for to select it. If I want to scan the available options, I can either drag the elevator bar up and down, or use the arrows by either depressing them to move quickly up and down the different text options, or click one at a time. We've selected Bahamas. That looks fine. I am getting a visual reference over here on the right of the first two characters, the TH in the word the. And I'll select bold. Remember that I can select the different attributes that are highlighted. In this case, for Bahamas, I could select either normal or bold type. I can also set my size by either cursor selecting and then changing the point size here, or by scrolling up and down with the arrows. And we'll take it back up to 50. Now down here at the bottom, most of the options are the same as what you had in headline text. Spacing is the same. I can set my inter-character, inter-word, which has to do with the spacing between the words, inter-character having to do with the spacing between the individual characters, inter-line spacing, which has to do with the spacing between the different lines, and inter-paragraph, which is new for the paragraph text dialog box, where I can set the space in between individual paragraphs. I'm just going to cancel out of this box for now because I like that spacing. I can paste from the Windows clipboard by depressing the paste button. Now here's an option that's new to the paragraph text dialog box. This is the columns button. I'll just click on the columns button and show you here I can set the number of columns that this paragraph text will have. For example, we'll work with 2 columns, and I can also set gutter width, which has to do with the spacing between the columns. And what I'll want to do is perhaps set 0.20 inches for the gutter width of this text. I simply click OK to select those options. I can also import text from different word processors by clicking on the import button and then selecting the text file from the different directories that I have on my system. Once I'm happy with the paragraph text that I'm working with, I've set the typeface, the point size, the spacing, columns, what have you. I simply click OK. And as you can see, my text does appear on the screen. Now there are some fundamental differences between headline text that we did with the word Corel and paragraph text, which you see just below it, and we'll explore them in depth in the text section. But for now, what I've been able to do in this introduction is show you the basic drawing tools that we have in CorelDRAW and show you the objects that you can get with them. First, we started with our square or rectangle tool, and we drew this rectangle on the page. Then the ellipse or circle, and we drew a circle on the page. Freehand drawing, and we did both a curved and a straight line. And then we also worked with the 2 types of text, headline text and paragraph text. In the next section, we'll work on our major editing tools, the pick tool and then the edit tool from beyond there. Now that we have some objects up on the screen,
Let's look at the most basic ways to manipulate those objects. The first tool we'll look at is the pick tool. This is our main editing tool. It's used for skewing, rotation, placement, and many other procedures. Let's go back to the screen now and explore the pick tool.
I've left a couple of our objects up on the screen for working with the pick tool, which is the main editing tool in Corel Draw. Now there are a number of different ways to select the pick tool. I can either hit the space bar, as I'm doing here, and I'll automatically select the pick tool from the tool I'm working on. Or, for example, if I was working with the square or rectangle tool, I could just go up and actually click on the pick tool itself with my mouse. Now there are three ways to select an object for manipulation, and I'm going to show you each of these. I can click on the wireframe or outline of an object. As you can see right here, I'm going to click on the outline of my rectangle, and what I see are 8 little squares forming a bounding box outside of the object. This shows me that I have selected that object with the pick tool for manipulation. The second way to select an object for use with the pick tool is marquee selecting. And in this case, I'll marquee select the word Corel by starting outside of the object and dragging the mouse down around the object. As you can see here, I have a blue dashed line box which shows me what I'm selecting. And every object that is within that bounding box will be selected. As is here, it's just the word Corel. And you see I have selected the word Corel because the 8 little squares forming the bounding box are around the object. The third way to select objects for manipulation is by hitting the Tab key, and this will take me from one object to the next. Right now I'm just going to hit the Tab key, and as you can see it's going to scroll through the different objects, so I can select any object I want on the page just by hitting the Tab key until the object I want is selected. I also want you to be aware that with the marquee selecting, I can select multiple objects. For example, if I start outside of every object on the page and include all of the objects within that marquee box, they will all be selected. And now my bounding box with my handles are around all 3 objects on this page. Now I'm going to click outside of the bounding box to deselect my objects. So a single click will deselect any objects that you have on the page. And let's go back and select our rectangle. Now once your object is selected, there are all kinds of different manipulations that you can do. You can move the object simply by positioning your mouse with your arrow on the outline of the object, holding down the mouse button, and dragging the object anywhere you want on the page. As you can see here, the object is moving around the page. The status bar is giving me information regarding the new placement of that object. So for example, I could move my rectangle. When I release the mouse button, it will automatically move to the new position. The next way that I can move objects is by using the cursor controls on my keyboard to nudge the object, and I'm just nudging to the left or nudging to the right. I can nudge down and up as well just by using the arrows on my keyboard. I can also scale an object either proportionally by dragging from any of the corners, and as you can see here I've made my rectangle larger, and any corner will allow me to do that, or non-proportionally by using the inner boxes and either squeezing the object up in this case or stretching it out or in. I can change the way the object appears. Now I've used the rectangle as my example, but the same procedures would apply to any other object that I create in Corel Draw. For example, with the text, I could stretch it out or squeeze it in, get some interesting effects just by manipulating the size and shape of that object. Now there is an important difference. I talked earlier about the differences between headline text and paragraph text, and there's an important difference in the way the pick tool works with headline or paragraph text, and I'll show you this now. As you can see, when I resize with headline text, the actual text itself grows larger. The text itself is the object. I can squeeze in or squeeze out and the text itself changes. Now let's go down, and by clicking on the outline I'm going to select the paragraph text, because I want you to see that with the paragraph text It's really just the actual bounding box for the paragraph text that's going to change size. I'm going to proportionally scale that box up. The text will not change point size. Just the outside of the box itself changes. The text itself remains the same. Learn it this way. For headline text, you should think of the text as the actual letters, the actual letter shapes. For paragraph text, you should think of the object as being within a frame, and the frame is what you manipulate with the pick tool, not the letter shapes. Let's resize that down a little bit, resize our box down. As you can see, the text will regroup in order to fit in the new area that I've enabled it to be in a frame. Let's go back to our rectangle. I'm going to click on it to select it because I want to show you an additional feature of the pick tool. If I click on a selected object a second time, I will enter into the rotate and skew mode. First, I'll show you rotation. By selecting any of the corner arrows, these rounded arrows, on any of the four corners, and by dragging the object, I can rotate it around the center. And it'll continue to rotate, the status bar giving me information regarding the angle of rotation until I'm comfortable with where it's rotated to. And again, remember our control key, which constrains actions within Corel Draw, will help me constrain my actions. Again, I've got it set up for 15-degree constrain. And once I'm comfortable with the rotation, I release the mouse button and the object will remain rotated to that degree. For skewing, you use these arrows that are on the inside of the bounding box. And for example, I'll take these at the bottom, and by dragging with my mouse, again getting a visual cue from the blue dotted box, I can skew my object to the left or the right in this case. Status bar giving me information regarding the stretch. I can skew from the side as well. I'll show you very easily by dragging the mouse until I have the position where I want it, and then releasing the mouse button to complete the skew. It's also important to note that the center of rotation is not fixed. This circle, with the small circle in the center, is our center of rotation. To move it, I can simply select my cursor over it, drag it with the mouse to the new position, for example down here at the bottom left, and now my rotation will be around that center. As you can see here, it's rotating around a new center of rotation. And that brings us to the end of the pick tool.
The next tool we're going to look at is the shape tool, and it's used to reshape the object.
The second editing tool is the shape tool, also known as the node edit tool. And I'm going to simply click on it to select it. Now, this tool does double duty. When it's first used on an object, it's used to reshape the object, and the different objects are reshaped in different ways. Let's start with the rectangle, and I'm going to select it by clicking on the outline of the object. Now, as you can see, there is a node at each corner of my square. And when I drag in from any of the four corners, I get a rounded corner rectangle or square. And if I hold the control key down, remember it will constrain objects in Corel Draw. It will constrain it to set increments. And I'll just leave a rounded corner rectangle on the page. Let's also select the circle, and I'll show you here there's a single node. When I drag inside the object, I'll get a pie or different pie shapes. When I drag outside the object, I get different lengths of an arc. Shaping curves or freehand objects is more involved than shaping rectangles and ellipses. For one thing, curves have up to 3 different node types, including cusp, smooth, and symmetrical. And for another, each node has at least 1 and usually 2 control points. Now, I'm not going to get into too much depth here. You can refer to your manual for further details. But I want to show you the basic ways that you'll work with your freehand shapes. I'm going to select the object by clicking on it, and as you can see here, I have 3 nodes on this object just because of the way I've drawn it. If I click on a node, a control handle becomes apparent, and this helps me to affect the size and the shape of that curve. If I pull it out, as you can see, and stretch it around, I'm affecting the appearance of that freehand line. I can also marquee select a number of nodes. In this case, 2 nodes are highlighted, and then they will act as one. I can move those 2 together and place them at different points on the page. Another thing to know about is that I can double-click on this line itself, as I've done right here, and enter into the Node Edit dialog box. There is a lot of control here for you. You can delete a node, break the line at a specific node. You can convert a curve to a straight line between 2 points, add nodes to the line, and a host of other options. These are all covered in detail in your manual. What I'll do here is I'll show you what happens when I depress Add and add a node to the line. The node was added at the point that I clicked on the line. If I clicked, for example, up here at the top part of the line and added a node, it would be added at the point that I clicked on the line. Now the Shape tool gives us a lot of control over text, and this is what I want to show you next. And in this case, headline text and paragraph text work much the same. So let's first select our headline text. And as you can see here, there is a node box to the bottom left of each letter, C, O, R, E, L. And that little box controls the attributes of that specific letter. Let's first select the letter C, and I'm going to double-click on the small box to the bottom left of that letter. This takes me into the Character Attributes box, and as you can see, I can effect many changes to that specific letter C. For example, up on the upper left, I can change the typeface, and as you'll remember, we can select the typefaces by either using the up or down arrows, by moving the elevator box itself, and then by clicking on the typeface that we're after. We can change the size of that specific letter by scrolling up and down on the point size. We can make this specific letter superscript or subscript, raising it above or below the text on the screen. We can also affect the shift of the object, horizontal shift, in other words, moving the letter a set amount left or right, the vertical shift up or down, and the character angle, putting a slight angle on the object if that's what we want. I'm going to click OK and take us back into our screen. And now you can see the change that we made to just that one letter, the C. If I want to, I can also marquee select a number of letters, in this case the O and the R, and make changes to groups of letters. If I went in and clicked on the node to the bottom left of the O and the R now, I would affect changes to those 2 letters. When working with text, you sometimes want to kern it, moving individual characters slightly to affect the spacing between them, making the text more readable, and CorelDRAW makes it very easy for you to do that. And I'll work with the C to show you how this is done. I'm just going to drag the letter. I'm also going to hold the Control key down to constrain this letter to the baseline. I'm holding down the Control key, and now I can just move that letter C to the left or the right, changing the placement of it to where it's more pleasing to the eye. And I just release the mouse button when I have the letter where I'd like it to be. I can do that for groups of letters or individual letters as well. Now this arrow to the left of the object and this arrow to the right of the object affect the inner character, inter-word, and inter-line spacing. For example, this arrow to the right of the object, if I just stretch the text out, the spacing of each individual letter will be opened up. So I can globally change the spacing of the object. And I'll stretch it back just a little bit. If I hold the Control key down, it'll affect just the inter-word spacing. In this case, I just have one word down on the page. And here on the left, the arrow will affect the inner line spacing. If I were to drag this down, it would open up more space in between multiple lines. All of these controls worked in exactly the same way for paragraph text down at the bottom. And I'll show you by clicking on the outline of the object. Each letter does have its own node, and I could go in and affect the exact same changes to paragraph text. Now this is the first usage of the Shape tool. In the next section, we'll explore special effects in CorelDRAW.
Once you're happy with the basic shape and characteristics of an object, the Shape tool is used again to apply certain special effects: extrusion, perspective, and enveloping.
Once you're happy with the basic shape and characteristics of an object, you can apply various special effects, also using the Node Edit tool. In this case, I've put down on the screen the word envelope, because that's the first special effect we're going to look at. Now let's go up under the Effects menu and see right here that we have an option called Edit Envelope, and a pull-out or fly-out menu with 4 different options also becomes displayed. Now these represent the 4 types of envelope that we're going to be working with. The first 3 are typically used to change the shape of one side of an object, and then the 4th is for more dramatic changes, for example, text inside an irregular shape. But we'll go through them one at a time. The first one right here is highlighted, and this is the straight line enveloping. So let's select that one, and I'll show you the kind of effect you can get. Now immediately, Corel Draw has changed us to the Node Edit tool, and there's now a red dashed box outside of the object, and this signals to me that I'm working with a special effect. And there are small nodes, just like in a normal bounding box, around the 4 corners and halfway through each side. Now here, as I mentioned, the first type, the straight line enveloping, is typically used to change the shape of one side of an object. So let's just drag up the node from the top side of this envelope and take a look at the effect. It'll take just a sec to build, and as you can see here, there is a straight line that's been applied to this side of our envelope, and yet we've been able to dramatically change the shape of the text that's contained therein. I'm going to go up under Effects, drag down to Clear Envelope, and go back to where we started with our text to show you the next type of envelope, which is the single arc. Now with the single arc envelope, as you'll see, there is a smooth single curve from one side of the object to the other, and the text will form to that shape. A single arc that flows from one side to the other. Let's go in and clear our envelope again. Go back under Edit Envelope to the third type of envelope, which is a double arc with 2 curves. And as you can see here, when I pull up the top, that there actually are 2 curves that are happening on each side. There's a curve slightly in at the beginning of the object, and then it smooths up to a top curve, and then back down again. So you can see the different types of effects you can get from these 3 initial types of enveloping. I'm going to clear them again. And let's go back in one more time and look at the free form or unconstrained. This is the most versatile type of envelope. With the unconstrained envelope, you have all kinds of control. I'll show you here. I'm going to drag down the bottom so that you can see we actually have control points, as we did when we were node editing earlier on our line. With these control points, you can actually move the line. You see how this is changing here, and change the actual shape of the envelope. And I'll show you that you could perform this on both sides, make a lot of changes, really get some dynamic graphic looks. This is a sample which uses the unconstrained enveloping, but as you can see, there are all kinds of effects that you could get. The second special effect is perspective. I'll go up under the Effects menu and edit the perspective of the object that I'm on. Now, as you can see, once again, we've switched to the Node Edit tool, and there's a bounding box on all 4 sides of the object. And I'm just going to stretch up the left side in order to get my vanishing point on the screen. Stretch down on the left side as well. A little bit more. Let's see if we can get our vanishing point on the screen. And over here to the right, as you can see, there's a little X. That's my vanishing point. Now I have a couple of ways of setting the perspective of this object. The easiest way, of course, is just to grab that vanishing point, move it around on the screen, in, out. You can see what's happening here is I'm changing the perspective of the object. And I'll do it very exaggerated so you can see the effect. And let's hit F9 to do a full screen preview. And you can see what's happened here. It's as though this word perspective is vanishing into the distance. The other way that you can change the perspective of the object is to actually move the node boxes themselves. Either way, it's your choice. For the third special effect, blend, there are 2 different ways that we can do this. The first, I'm going to blend from one object to the other, in this case from the word hot to the word cold. To select both of the objects, I'm going to marquee select around both of them. And as you can see, they are both selected because the bounding box is around both of the objects. Now under Effects, I'll go down to Blend. Within this dialog box, I can set the number of blend steps. In other words, in this case, there will be 20 steps from one object to the other, and I can also put a rotation on the blend if I want the object to rotate as it transforms from one object to the other, and I can also tell Corel Draw to map matching nodes. In this case, I'm not going to set that option, and there's further explanation about that in your manual. Now when I click OK, you'll see the effect occur that it's changing from one object to the other. And I'm going to press F9 and go to our full screen preview so you can see the effect you'll get. You can see here it's changing from hot to cold, from one color to the other. The second use for the blend feature in Corel Draw is to get beautiful shading from one object to the other. Here I've got a very simple can shape, and I'm going to want it to look as though the can is rounded. So I've got both of the objects selected, the main portion of the can, and then also the highlight section, going in under the Effects menu to blend again. And in this case, I'm going to have more blend steps, no rotation. And very quickly, you'll see what's happened here when we go to F9 to get our full screen preview. It's going to build a nice rounded object, a very beautiful highlighted effect. I've opened up another file to show you a flower that was created using the blend tool. It's great to watch this one build and see how the leaves attain their shape and shade. The next effect I'm going to show you is Corel Draw's ability to extrude an object, in other words, add the illusion of depth. I've selected my object by clicking on the outer frame. Now under the Effects menu, I go to Extrude. Here I'll see I have two options. I can set the X offset or the Y offset very simply by going up and down with the arrows. Same with the Y offset. And I'm going to leave this at parallel extrusion. I could also set it for perspective and determine my absolute coordinates, but for this first sample, I'll show you without the perspective setting on. When I've set my X and Y offset, I simply click OK, and Corel Draw will automatically add that depth. Now I'm going to hit the F9 key and go to a full screen preview so you can see the effect in action. Very dynamic. I've called a second sample up on the screen so you can see what happens here, where you play with some of the enveloping of some text and then also add a perspective extrusion to it where it's vanishing off into the distance. When working with a drawing, you sometimes want to magnify several objects, a single object, or even part of an object. The Zoom tool lets you do that by zooming in and out on objects. This is our Zoom tool here, and I select it just by clicking on it. And as you can see, there's a flyout menu with 5 different options. The first zooms in on the object. The second option zooms out one level. The third is the one-on-one, which will give you an image on the screen that's approximately the same size as what will appear on your final printed page. The next option gives you all of the objects that you've created as close as possible filling the screen. And then the fourth is your full page preview. I'm going to just show you these first 2 options to show you how the zoom works. So I'll select the zoom in. To zoom in on an object, you want to marquee select the area that you'd like to have fill the page. As you can see down here, I'm zooming in to almost completely include the letter D from the word draw. And as you can see, Corel Draw has zoomed in on that object. If I use the minus zoom tool, it will take me out one step.
Now that we've explored the ways to create an object, let's look at the Outline tool. The Outline tool does exactly what it suggests. It affects the outline of the object that you're creating, giving you access to width, color, dashed or dotted lines, arrowheads, and even some calligraphic effects.
So far, all of the objects you've drawn have had the same outline, but with Corel Draw's Outline pen, you can vary the width, shape, and color of outlines. You can also create interesting effects, including calligraphic pen-like shapes for text and other objects. Now what I'm going to do for this section is use the half-screen preview. by depressing Shift and F9 at the same time. And as you can see, over here on the right side of the page are my images as they will actually print. Over here on the left are the outlines I'm going to be working with. Let's select an object. I'll start with the rectangle and go into the Outline Pen tool. Now you can see here we have a flyout menu, and the flyout menu has two lines of icons. The ones in the top determine the width of the outlines, and those in the bottom line determine their shading or color. Let's apply a thicker outline to this rectangle and show you how easy it is to use the CorelDRAW default settings. As you can see very quickly, this rectangle has now got a much thicker outline. And here's a quick tip for color. You can just use your right mouse button and the color palette that appears at the bottom of the screen and just select your color. I'm going from the pink to the blue to the green, very easy just by clicking with my right mouse button. I'll leave that blue, go over here and select the straight line. Let's go back into the Outline Pen tool because I want to show you some of the control that CorelDRAW gives you over the outline of an object. At the top of the Outline Pen dialog box is a representation of the outline as it appears. Right now we're just working with a solid line. Let's go into the dashing button and work with some of CorelDRAW's dashed or dotted line styles. As you can see, I can just scroll up and down through this dialog box and find all kinds of different line styles to use. And what I'm going to do is I'll just go up to the top here and select a simple dotted line style. Once I've selected the line I'm after, I click OK. And now my reference is showing that I'm working with a dotted line. I can also select arrowheads at this point by depressing the arrows button. Here in the arrowhead selection dialog box, I've got a start arrowhead box and an end arrowhead box. This is very simple to use. I just use my left button to select the start of my arrowhead and the right button to select the end of my arrowhead. And as you can see as well, CorelDRAW gives you all kinds of arrowheads that come with the package, and you can also create your own. Once I've selected the arrowheads I want, I just click OK. And again, in my Outline Pen dialog box, I have a reference right on screen of the arrowheads that I've selected. And once I'm happy with the dashed line style and the arrowheads, I can simply click OK. And there on the screen you can see our arrowheads are being displayed and our dotted line is displayed as well. You can get some very great effects very quickly just by using the different line styles and arrowheads. Now the third thing I want to show you about the Outline Pen, I'll use the S to display this, and let's go back into the Outline Pen dialog box, because this is a great control that will give you a lot of calligraphic pen effects. Within CorelDRAW, we have the ability to actually change the nib shape. As you can see, we've been working with a square nib, or consider it the tip of a pen. In CorelDRAW, we can change the shape of the nib. For example, up here I'm changing it to a circle, or back to a square. And I can change the pen width just by scrolling up and down with my arrows. I can also change the angle of the nib, and you see what's happening over here to the nib shape is I'm putting the pen on an angle, and also change the stretch. What I'm doing here is stretching the pen into a very narrow pen. Once I'm happy with the nib shape, and this is fun to experiment around with, I simply click OK, and as you can see, a very quick calligraphic effect is achieved. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, right over here to the left of the S, so you can see it's almost as though the pen has changed direction as it strokes around the letter.
You'll have a lot of fun playing around with the fill tool. Basically, we have 5 types of fill, and we're going to review each one of them one by one.
Now let's take a look at how to add color and some dynamic fill patterns and textures to your objects. I've drawn a couple of basic objects on the screen. We'll work with a rectangle, a circle, and just some letters to show you that you can apply color, fill, and textures to anything that you draw in CorelDRAW. Let's start with the word draw, and I've selected it by clicking on the outline. The quickest way to select a color in CorelDRAW is to go down to the palette at the bottom of the screen. You remember we used the right mouse button to select the outline color, and I'll put a blue outline on draw. The left mouse button selects the fill. For example, I could make it yellow with a blue outline. And here's another tip. It's very easy to speed through the CorelDRAW palette by using your right mouse button on the arrow at the bottom right of the screen. As you can see, as I click through with my right mouse button, I'm able to speed through just a host of colors that CorelDRAW gives in its default palette. And back on the left side with my right mouse button to speed back to my beginning point. If you want to build your own colors, you can go into the Fill tool and use the Corel Draw palette. This is a very extensive feature. There's more information about this in your manual, but I'll show you briefly how you can go into the palette and work with a number of different models to create a whole host of colors. But for now, let's just use the palette that's at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to select the rectangle next and go back into the outline fill. As you can see here, we do have a number of different options. You could have no fill, a bitmap pattern, a vector pattern, a fountain fill, and some PostScript textures. And on the bottom of the flyout menu are some convenience settings for white, black, and different shades of gray. Let's start with bitmap texture here, and we'll fill our rectangle with a bitmap texture. As you can see here, we've entered into another dialog box. This is the bitmap fill pattern, and Corel Draw comes with all kinds of bitmap fill patterns for you to use. You can also create your own. Let's go up and just select these circles, and you can also select the tile size just by clicking on small, medium, or large, and we'll just select medium for this example. Once you're happy with this, you simply click OK to proceed. In the next dialog box, Corel Draw is asking you what colors you'd like to apply to your bitmap pattern, and you simply select both the foreground, I've selected a pink here, and the background by clicking on the color you'd like. In this case, we'll do pink on yellow. And once you're happy with that color selection, click OK. And as you can see what's happening on the screen, this rectangle has now been filled with a bitmap pattern in the colors that I've selected. Let's go to our next fill option, which are vector fills. And in much the same way, Corel Draw is going to allow me to see my selection. I just click on the different names. I have a visual reference right on screen, and these are vector patterns that I can apply. And I'll stick with these birds. I think these are nice looking. Click OK, and once again, Corel Draw is going to go to another dialog box for me. And in this case, I again set small, medium, or large for my vector fill size. Once I'm happy, I'll just stick with it as it is. Click OK, and in just a few minutes I have a vector fill in the object I've selected, in this case the birds in the circle. Now I'm going to go back and select the word draw again, and we'll go back into the outline pen dialog box and work with some of the fountain fills. Now there are two types of fountain fills that Corel gives you, linear and radial, and you select them simply by clicking your mouse on the object, linear or radial. We'll start first with linear, and as you can see again, Corel Draw asks you to set the color name on two sides. This is to create a blend from one color, one side of the object, to another color on the other side of the object. I'll go from blue to black, or blue to pink. Let's get a nice color blend on screen. And as you can see, we're going from blue on one side of the object to pink on the other side of the object, and we do get a visual reference right here on screen. I can also change the angle of the fill, and I'll also get a reference on screen. I can click up and down with my mouse on the arrows, or I can cursor select and, for example, change to a 30-degree angle, and I'm able to see that right on screen before I proceed. Once I'm happy with the linear fountain fill, the angle, the colors I've selected, I can click OK, and once again Corel Draw is going to apply that to the object that I've selected. Let's go back to our circle, and I'll show you the other type of fountain fill that Corel Draw gives you, which is the radial. Now this is where it fills from the outside of the object to the inside of the object. I'll use a blue, I'm just clicking on that color to select it, and a green, clicking with my left mouse button to select the inside color, and it flows from the outside of the object to the inside. Once I'm happy with the color selections, I simply click OK. And once again, you see what we've done is create an interesting shading technique and also simulate somewhat of a 3D sphere by going from the outside of the object to the inside of the object. Another option that Corel Draw gives you are PostScript textures. These do not display on screen, but they are available for those people with PostScript printers, and they're described in further detail in your manual. We also have the convenience settings at the bottom where we could take a selected object, in this case the circle, and apply a quick shade of gray, for example, and that's what I'll do now. CorelDRAW also gives you lots of power over editing and arranging your objects on the page, and I'm going to run through these briefly. Let's go up under the Edit menu. I'll show you first the Undo option, and this is very helpful for undoing the last step that you've just performed. For example, if you stretch a curve and you want to undo that, just come up under the Edit menu and click on Undo. You can also always use the alternate backspace key combination to undo your most recent move. By the same token, you can repeat a move by hitting Ctrl-R or pulling down to the Repeat from the Edit menu. Cut, copy, and paste have to do with the Windows clipboard and are described in more detail in your manual. You can also clear objects just by hitting the Delete key or pulling down Clear under the Edit menu, and duplicate an object by hitting Ctrl-D or hitting the duplicate under the Edit menu. We'll also talk about copy style from and editing text in a few minutes. But the copy style from, let's look at the dialog box. If you have an object on your screen and you want to copy that style to another object, you just select the attributes that you want to copy, for example, fill or outline color, and then when you click OK, it will ask you what object you want to copy from. Very, very simple procedure. For right now, I'm going to cancel out.
It's easy to arrange objects on the page in relation to one another by using the commands found under the Arrange menu.
Under the Arrange menu, CorelDRAW gives you a lot of options for placing your objects on the page. For example, the object I've selected, the black rectangle, I'm going to move it to the front of the collection of 3 objects that it's near. I can move it to the back, I can move it forward 1, or back 1. And as you can see, with all of these procedures, I can either pull down the menu, or I can use hotkeys, Shift Page Up, Shift Page Down, Page Up, and Page Down to get the same procedure working. Let's select a group of objects here. These 3, I've selected the 3 rectangles, and go into the Arrange menu and group these objects together. What this is doing is telling CorelDRAW that these 3 objects are, in a sense, glued together. They will all move together. I can group as many objects as I like, or as few as 2. And all 3, in this case, will work as a single object. 3 layers, but a single object. Let's go down and select the magenta rectangle and the black circle. Go back up under the Arrange menu and combine these objects. Now in this case, before I do this function, what CorelDRAW is going to do is take these 2 objects and combine them into one. Unlike Group, where the 3 objects I selected still retain their individual identity, Combine will squeeze 2 objects into one. Now as you can see here with this object, I've now got a single rectangle with a circle that's clipped out of the center, almost like a cookie cutter. The reason I'd use this is for some creative masking techniques. I'm going to move the object just up over the word draw, and you can see what's happening here is the word draw is peeking out from in between my object. This is a very powerful graphic technique called masking. To show you the next thing under the Arrange menu, I'm going to select the word Draw, go up under the Arrange menu, and Convert to Curves. What this does is take the text that I've put down on the page and convert it to the Bezier curves that are at the heart of CorelDRAW drawing. I've now converted the word Draw into a graphic element. This is no longer text, it's now a graphic. When I zoom in a bit, remember I just click on the plus sign and marquee select the area that I want to zoom into. By using my Node Edit tool, as I always do for editing or shaping objects, I can actually take this letter and create a perfectly new form, treating it just as I would any other drawing that I've created in CorelDRAW. This is very powerful for creating logos or other very special type treatments. Let's zoom back out by using the minus. What I'm going to do next is show you another feature under the Arrange menu. The first thing I'm going to do is clear my screen. A real quick way to do this is to go into the Edit menu, select all the objects, go down to the bottom of the Edit menu and select all, and as you can see, all the objects that I've created have been selected. Now back under Edit, I'm going to clear them. And now I'm back to a simple page. For the next step, I'm going to put some text down on the page. And I'll just take the typeface that I have here, make it a little bit smaller perhaps. And now we have some text on the page. I'm also going to draw a free-form line, just a simple path underneath the object. And for this next step, I'm going to select both objects by marquee selecting them. Remember, I just drag my mouse using the pick tool around both objects to select both of the objects. Going back under the Arrange menu, I'm going to fit text to a path. And what this will do is fit text to the path of any object that you've created. Right here you can see my line was a little bit crazy there at the end, and CorelDRAW follows that line perfectly. I'm also going to show you the dialog box for the Align feature under the Arrange menu. In this case, if you have two objects and you want to align them horizontally or vertically, you can do so within CorelDRAW by simply selecting the different types of alignment that you want to perform. Left alignment, top, center, bottom. These are all available to you.
When you need precise controls, such as guidelines or grids, you'll find them under the Display menu.
Under the Display menu, CorelDRAW allows me to change a lot of the settings for how the program looks. For example, under Grid Setup, I can change the grid parameters and in fact show the grid if I would prefer to work with the grid on. As you can see now, there is a visible grid on the page. Other options under the Display menu, I can show the rulers as I've done here, show the status line, show the color palette, or turn each of these options off if I'd rather not have them active. I can also show the preview. We've learned through the demo to use Shift F9 or show full screen preview by simply using F9 key. We can also preview selected objects only or show bitmaps and refresh the wire screen. I'm going to show you another quick tip from CorelDRAW, which is pull down rulers. If I have my ruler showing on the page and I just drag down from the ruler area, as you can see, a blue dashed line will appear. Now this will not print. This is a guideline only, and you can pull it in from the left side as well. This is very helpful for placing objects on the page or setting alignment, because the objects will actually cling to those lines as though they were magnetized. This is very helpful for people who are familiar with working with Aldus PageMaker, for example, which uses a similar ruler style. CorelDRAW also comes with over 600 different clip art images that you can access either through Mosaic, the visual file manager, or bring them into CorelDRAW directly. We have lots of different images here for you, business, people, animals, all kinds of things for you to play with, and then create your own original graphics using these as your basis. We also have over 3,000 symbols that you can access in CorelDRAW. To get to these symbols, all you have to do is hold down the Shift key while you're using your text tool and clicking on the page. And I'm just going to scroll through here a little bit so you can see some of these symbols and see how they look on the page. Lots of different categories, all kinds of ways you can use these.
CorelDRAW also comes with 3 other programs: Mosaic, a visual file manager, Corel Trace, a batch auto trace program, and Boss, a typeface conversion utility. I'll show you how to launch each of these programs and give you a brief look at what they'll do.
Here under the Windows Program Manager, I've made a CorelDRAW program group, and in it I've put the 4 different programs that comprise CorelDRAW: CorelDRAW 2.0, Mosaic, Corel Trace, and Boss. I'm going to go through Mosaic, Corel Trace, and Boss individually, show you a little bit about what they're about, and make sure you know how to launch them. Let's first look at Mosaic. To launch a program, remember, just double-click on the icon. Mosaic is a visual file manager that comes with CorelDRAW, and it helps you manage all of the great graphics that you're going to create with this fabulous program. All you have to do is look at the different images and see that you're able to actually manage your files, not by what the name is necessarily, but also by how the graphic looks. By scrolling up and down, you can see the different images that you've created, and also perhaps have a slideshow, set different preferences, manage your library. This is what it's all about, is managing a library of files in CorelDRAW. Corel Trace is the batch auto trace program that comes with Corel Draw, and let's load it by double-clicking on the icon. What Corel Trace will do for you is batch auto trace any TIFF or PCX images that you might have and convert them to vector art for manipulating in Corel Draw. I'll give you a brief example of what this will do for you. Let's select the file SHRME, double-click to select it for tracing, hit the Start button, and as you can see, there's the bitmap, and automatically Corel Trace will trace it for you. Then that vector image can be taken into Corel Draw for manipulation. I'm going to close us back out and take us back out to the main screen simply by hitting Close from the main menu bar. Whiffenboss is the typeface conversion utility that comes with Corel Draw. I'll double-click on the icon to launch the program. With Whiffenboss, you can take typefaces from all the major typeface manufacturers, Bitstream, Digifont, Readable PostScript, ZSoft Type Foundry, or any other typefaces that you have that are compatible. Bring them into Corel Draw after converting them to our format.
That's it. We've reached the end of our first look at Corel Draw. Where to go next? If you haven't already, install Corel Draw on your system. You can find the instructions in our user manual and also in the README First guide. If you're having any problems, remember we want to support you every step of the way. Call our unlimited free hotline support to answer any questions you might have. And as a last message, I want you to remember to have fun with Corel Draw. Let your imagination soar.